So I'm actually going to just kind of launch into the tool a little bit. And I think George kind of covered this, but why we ended up developing this was truly the impetus was the shared print project. And again, as George mentioned, I think at first we looked at other solutions that were out there in the commercial market, and there was just nothing that was affordable. So it really made sense. We had already developed a journal analysis tool, and some of you may have already used this to compare databases. So you can compare, like a lot of libraries right now are sending us their entire set of holdings, and then you can compare that to other databases that are within Gold Rush. So we already have a tool for the journal component, so it really made sense also to have something to look at all of the other items in your catalog. So some of the characteristics we looked at when we originally developed this tool was, one of the things was really making sure that it would be scalable, because we really have a variety of sizes of libraries as we've kind of grown in the Alliance. And another thing that's changed is that also we wanted to look at types of libraries. So right now, it really lends itself well to the shared print project, but also public libraries may want to be able to do some collection analysis, maybe comparing a branch to a central location or comparing to another library. So we were trying to really think broadly about it and how it would be used in, different situations. Another key thing was that it needed to really be able to work in real time, that people really wanted to be able to see the results right there on screen. And our journal tool, if you've used that, you see the charts come back right away, and you can kind of get a really quick analysis of what your collection is like, or what your journals, where there's overlap and unique content. And then also it was important that that we can support different types of comparisons. So one-to-one in certain situations, but a lot of times you might want to compare your library to the entire library or to another group of libraries. So that was really important. Being able to get getting the records out of the system was also important. So it's nice to be able to see everything on screen, and I'll be able to show you that. But it's also really, especially when you're dealing with this like massive amounts of data, you really need to be able to export it. And we realize that that people want exports for different reasons. So in some cases, you may want MARC records back from your system, but then in other cases, maybe you wanted a delimited file or an XML export to do something else with it. Also, it was important to show what's unique and overlapping in a visual way so that people could see that right away without having to really think about it. And also to be able to, what George had mentioned earlier, is to be able to limit the collection. So it's one thing to see how your collection compares to another library, but really it doesn't help unless you can actually limit by a facet, or, because most of the time you're looking at an aspect of your collection, not the entire, 4 or 5 million records. So that was really important. Another key aspect was looking at the matching algorithm and being able to, instead of, for example, with Prospector, it looks at, in order to create a match in records, it looks at an OCLC number, an ISBN, and like the first part of the title. And we really wanted to move away from something like an OCLC number or ISBN, because that's something that not every record in Prospector has, or there's a lot of things that predate ISBNs or ISSNs, and not everything has an OCLC number. So it was really important to look at other parts of the MARC record, and I'm actually going to be able to show you what we're using for our matching algorithm. So these are the elements of the match key that we're using, or the elements of the MARC record that we're using for the match key. So you can see it's other parts of the, and it's very specific. We've been doing like some testing just in the office, and it's interesting to actually see these components come back. And what's really nice, when I show you the demo, you'll be able to see that, you'll actually be able to see the match key. So I think it helps to actually see how it's, the logic behind how we're matching records. But these are the main components of the match key. In terms of the underlying technology, so we're using Linux as the operating system, and then Play is the web application framework, and Solr, we're using Solr as our indexer, and that's really important, and we do a lot of, large amounts of indexing, and it's really a fast, Amazon, I think, also uses Solr, so it's one of the really great things about this tool is how quickly the results come back, and it's millions of records, so it really is great that we can do this in real time. We're also using this open source charting software, which is called High Charts. And I believe we use that one for our journal collection tool too. So, and then in terms of just the infrastructure, it's on virtualized machines. We did that a few years ago. We've set that up. And then we're also using the same mark ingester that was used for the Google Books. So that's kind of the basics of the technology behind it. And I'm sure Chet could talk a lot more intelligently about all of that. So in terms of how you get these records to our system, because that's probably one of the questions you have if you weren't the one who actually sent the records in. So first of all, it is system agnostic, so we've been able to work really, since MARC is a standard and that's what we're using, we can get records from any system that can export MARC records. So that's been really nice to have that, have it be system agnostic. So, we've gotten records from ALMA, III, and I know that some of New York is doing a pilot right now, and George also mentioned ACERL, and so those are also could be different systems. So that's one really nice thing about it. And then in terms of sending us records, what we've done is set up an FTP site. And so the first thing we do is ask for your IP address for the computer that's actually sending the records. And so once we get that, then we can send you some login information on how to get to the FTP site, and then you deposit records there, and there's a full directory. So the first time you deposit, it'll be in the full directory, and then as you send updates, then it goes into another updates directory. And you can send them as often as you like. We say no more than once a day. Probably more realistically, we'll get them, I'm guessing, monthly and quarterly. And one of the things we've kind of encouraged sites to do is to set up some kind of scripting so that you can just automatically send us these records. I think Marmot has done that for the Marmot libraries that are members of the Alliance, and so we just automatically get those. That way you don't have to really think about this process, and then you're assured that you're getting, that the records that are in the system are pretty recent updates. Let's see, so that's kind of the big things about about the technical details. And we'll send out instructions. Once we get your IP address, we do have a set of instructions that we've been sending out to people, and then we've just kind of worked with sites on that. And then the records are indexed in the system, and I think the first time they go in, I believe it takes a little bit. Actually, the first time they're set in, I think it might be like overnight. But the entire indexing process where if we decide we wanted to add a new facet, for example, we just added the Dewey facet, that takes a little bit longer because we have to index the entire database, which is now, I think it's close to 50 million records, because that's all of these sites that we've added. And so we're, continuously adding sites. In terms of the source of MARC records, when we first started this project, we started out with the Prospector database because that was really easy for us to get. We already were exporting Prospector for Summon and EBSCO, and so we took that export and loaded it into our system. But what we discovered pretty quickly after that is that what we really needed were exports from everybody's individual ILS, and that was for a couple of different reasons. One of the main reasons is that if people want, I mentioned that you can export sets of records, and so it really helps to get your own MARC record back instead of like a generic record. And so with Prospector, we have that master MARC record, but that may not be the one that you contributed. So this way we can get you can get your actual MARC record back. One of the other reasons for getting exports from your individual ILS is also that down the road we would like to add in circulation data. People have asked about that. Like it's interesting to see the content, but we'd also like to know how often certain things are circing. So that's in a separate field, in a 9XX field that's in the local system, but that's not in Prospector. And then also one of the things down the road is we'd like to add branch level data, and so we would have to get that from the local system. And I think the branch data would be really great, for public libraries especially, where they can do comparisons between their branch libraries. So those are some of the reasons that we chose to do local exports. So we ended up kind of scratching that and going and getting records from each individual system. And I think I think the matching process, I think everything just is cleaner that way. So, and then the other thing is that everything that you have in your catalog, you don't necessarily contribute to Prospector. So if we can get everything from your catalog, then you're sure that we're getting your entire catalog instead of just what you contributed. And then I'm just going to cover a couple of other sample use cases. We did talk about the shared print as a way of using this tool. Another thing you might be looking at is another way that you might use this tool is if you're thinking about starting a new program. I mean, maybe there's a graduate program in nursing, for example, just to throw something out, and you want to look at maybe a peer library has a strong nursing collection, and so you could limit by a call number facet, for example, and check to see what types of things they have in their nursing collection. So that might be another way of using this tool. Another way would be I mentioned with the branch comparison with public libraries, and also commercial data sets. Now, we haven't done this yet, but I think this could be really interesting if we can get like ebook collections from like Springer maybe or Elsevier. There's so many publishers out there. And then you could compare that to what's in your collection to see where there's overlap or unique items. So that's another way that we can use this down the road, is if we can get some of those data sets from other vendors. Or maybe the HathiTrust records would be great to look at. If we can get those MARC records and compare them to collections, that would be another way very useful analysis on looking at how your collection overlaps with the HathiTrust. Another thing is for weeding, and I think that's what a lot of libraries will probably use this tool for, is deciding to weed certain parts of your collection, and so you could find out based on the facets you can limit by things like publication year to determine what items to weed. And I think at this point I'm going to try to do the demo. And right now what we're looking at, just to give you an idea, is this is the journal tool, and so what we've also shown here is the knowledge base that's been updated in GoldRush. So I'm going to come to a screen like this, and I'm going to just, there's several things you can do here. You can do a keyword search or a different type of search here if you wanted to start out with a search. But in this one case, I'm going to go ahead and start out with comparing libraries. And you can see here, one thing I should point out is the number of records. So you can see that we have over 45 million records loaded in the entire system. And then the 21 million is the unique match keys. So those are where records have matched, kind of like with Prospector where you have that master record. Is sort of the same kind of concept. So I'm going to go ahead and choose two of our libraries that are in here, CU Boulder, and I'm going to look at UNC. And then I'm going to click Site Compare. And so initially what it's going to do is it's going to compare their entire collections. And then I'm going to use the facets to do some narrowing to kind of get to a special record set. So the comparison comes back. And right away you can see, of course, CU Boulder is about 4.9 million records, whereas UNC is just under 1 million. And then the light blue shows what they hold uniquely, and the dark blue is what they have in common. And at this level, there's not really much you can do with this. So what you really want to do is probably narrow in and look at a defined set. So I'm going to we have these facets over here on the left-hand side. And what we did was try to come up with some of the common ones that we thought you would want. Of course, if there's others, this is where we'll have some discussion after this, but I'm going to go ahead for now and go to the call number facet. And I'm going to, UNC has a strong education curriculum, so I'm going to limit my search by primary education. I did LB 1501 to LB 1547, and that just happens to be primary education. And so you can see the results have already come back. And it's interesting because even though CU Boulder had, almost 5 million records, you can see with UNC, when I limited to that small call number range, UNC actually has more records. So UNC, with this strong primary education collection, they may be wondering, well, what are those 64 unique items that CU Boulder holds that we don't have? And so you could click on the chart, or you can click here down in the table. But I'm going to go ahead and click on that table, and then what this is going to do is it brings up the search results. And so there's different ways, and you'll see why we have this whole export button, because you can only look at a certain amount on screen. But you can see here that I can, if I wanted to see more on screen here, I can change that. I can also sort by a different way, like by date, title, or author, and do a descending or ascending sort. And in this case, I think what I want to do is just show you what one of these records looks like and what we're capturing here. So you kind of see this brief record on screen, and then when I click on the location, the CU Boulder, I'm actually seeing CU's record at this time. And you'll notice here as I scroll down a little bit that in the middle of the screen is the match key, and this is what I was talking about in the beginning. You can see the elements here of the match key where we have the title. I think it's subfield A of the 245. You can see the publisher information here in the 260, the publication, the publisher and the publication date, and also the author. So we have that match key right there. And this is actually CU Boulder's record that they contributed to us. So that, and then I'm going to talk about this more later, but you can actually export the records at this point if you wanted. You could click this export button and you can get it back in these variety of formats, delimited format, Mark XML or Mark 21. And as George said, what we'll do is you'll, when you click that, you actually just get an email, and then you go to that email, you go to the link, and then you can download the records from there. So it's good to just go ahead. And that's why we have these accounts set up by email address, so that people can get their individual sets of records as they're using the tool. So that's one way that you can use this, and I'm going to show a couple of other things here. I'm going to start over just to clear everything out. Sometimes you can just, if you want to just remove one of these facets here, you can do it that way too. But I just wanted to show a different type of a search. Because as I had mentioned before, we can start out, there's different ways that we can start out. We can either start out by selecting the libraries first, or if you want, you could start out with a keyword, for example. So in this case, actually I'm going to start with selecting a library, but again I'm going to use, CU Boulder happens to be the one that has the most records loaded in the system right now. And so I'm going to try CU Boulder, and I'm going to compare it to the rest of the Alliance. So I can actually just click on this Colorado, Wyoming button, and what it'll do is it's going to select all of those sites that are in that group, and then it automatically will dedupe the CU Boulder so that I'm not comparing it to itself. So eventually this will show 14 libraries selected. And you can always see up here what your query is. It builds it up above. And so in this case, again, we're going to have this huge list of results. And so you'll notice down here it says narrow your search. And that's really the kind of obvious thing to do anyway, but it's really hard to paint all of this data on screen when these are such huge record sets. So I'm going to go ahead and do a narrowing with CU. I'm going to look at physics. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm using the search box to do a narrowing, to narrow my results set. If you're doing, one thing I want to mention about the search box is you have to type things, if it's an exact phrase like global warming, you'll want to type that into quotes, because otherwise it ORs it, and so you're getting global or warming, so that's not automatically built into the system. So we narrowed by by the word physics, and so it's still kind of large. So one of the things I want to look at, and you'll notice here too, is down the screen, held at 2 libraries, held at 3, held at 4. I think one of our sites that was looking at the tool had said, we want to know, even though, because originally we just had held at one library, or what was unique and what was common. We didn't differentiate like 2, 3, and 4, but we were asked if we could do that. And so that's something that we've added to the tool. In this case, I'm going to narrow it just a little bit more. I wanted to show that you could also do this. Another popular facet is to do it by the publication year. And so maybe in this case, CU Boulder is looking at getting rid of really old physics books. So I'm just going to type in, like, let's say 1930. Oops, I missed a... and I'm going to say to 1975, just sort of an arbitrary date range. And then I'll apply that. And it comes back, and you can kind of see it's building my search up here. And so we are able to narrow this a lot more. And so you can kind of see these results coming back, and maybe what we're interested in, let's look at, maybe we'll decide to weed this item if at least 3 other libraries hold it. So I clicked on the held by 4 or more, just to kind of give you an idea. So this is interesting because you can actually see the libraries here. And if I click on the result, then it will actually show me the MARC record for that particular site. So this is the University of Wyoming's MARC record. And again, you can see that match key. So that's another way that you can limit a search set. I'm going to go back to my main page here. And then one of the other things I wanted to mention on here, so we could, we can continue to refine, and as you're refining things and maybe building more complicated searches, one thing to keep in mind is that you can actually save a search. So I'm going to go ahead and just type in 1930 to 1975 as an example, and I'll just save that. And then the next time I come in, I could load my searches, and then I could, relaunch that search. So that's another nice way to use if you're doing, a lot of repetitive searches or just building kind of complicated ones, that's another way to use it. One other scenario I wanted to just show you, which is kind of interesting, is to look at the sites, to be able to see the sites in the tool, to see how many records each of them have. And so, because there's different ways that you can use this tool. So I'm going to wait for that to clear out. And then one of the things you can do is if you just want to see everything that's loaded for whatever reason, you want to see all the Alliance libraries, you can just hit the search key without putting in any kind of a search. And what it's going to do is bring back a list of all the records that are in the system, and then I will be able to click on, there's going to be a site code facet at the very bottom here. And this will show me, just in order by number of MARC records, how many each site has loaded into the system. And so you can kind of get an idea of what sites are in here. And at a level like this, you could click on really any of these, maybe Colorado State University. And then I'm actually looking at all the records. This is just sort of an interesting thing, I guess, to do. But you could then, at that point, if you wanted to do something like limit by other facets or keyword, you could use the facets here to do more limiting in that way. So that's another way to use if you wanted to just kind of get a quick snapshot of how many records that you actually have in the system, that's another way to look at it. Or to see other libraries that are within the system. Okay, so I just had a couple of tips, and I think I've already covered most of these, but the implied or, if so, and it's important to use, if you're using an exact phrase, to put it in quotes. One of the things I didn't point out, I kind of forgot, is that under that keyword you can do like a publisher search. So for example, if you wanted to see Elsevier or Springer or whatever publisher, you could also limit a search that way. And we're still doing a little bit of testing on those, the different searches, but the search box was intended to be able to let people do different types of searches in case they didn't want to, or if they wanted to also do a search and a facet, you can combine those things too. And I think you probably noticed that when you clicked on, I was able to click on the Colorado/Wyoming label and select all the sites ahead of time, and then it automatically deselected the site on the left-hand side. It does work best in Firefox. I use Chrome mostly, but it's just not as great in Chrome. So I just say, just use it on, and IE, I've done a little bit of testing in IE, but I really think it works the best in Firefox right now. When you start to use this a lot, you're going to probably get into wanting to build more complicated searches, maybe using the search box and also multiple facets. If it gets too complicated, the easiest way, or if something doesn't seem right, is always just to click the Start Over button. I found that's a lot easier than just Xing out a box from the search. That seems to work better. So it's easier, yeah, to do that. And then you can also, and as I mentioned, you can use the safe searches. Before I go into the discussion, one of the things that we're looking at doing, we just did the Dewey facet, so hopefully that will help with public libraries that want to use this tool. And the Dewey facet works off of the 082 field in the MARC record. And so that's where it's pulling the data. We realize that a lot of libraries don't necessarily store their Dewey numbers in that field. So, but that's just something to note. And also we have that LC call number facet already built in. One of the other things that we're looking at is you can, as I mentioned, you can export the records in XML. And so if you're probably familiar maybe with the Saphira work that they've done, the Saphira company, with some of the public libraries where they've published their catalogs on the web. And so one of the things we've been exploring, and we actually have a bib frame committee right now in the Alliance, is looking at, is there a way for us to take our records, because basically we can export them in XML, what would be the next steps to publishing them to the web? So maybe you would like to highlight a part of your collection, maybe old Colorado history or something. It would be great if you could take these records in XML format and be able to publish them. And so we're right now kind of looking further into what would that take. And so we've been working, a small subgroup is working on this because we would like to possibly offer that as an alternative for libraries. Another thing I think I mentioned earlier was that we are looking at incorporating circ data down the road. I really see that kind of as phase 2 of the project, because once we start looking at the 9 XX fields, they're kind of different for each library, and where libraries store things is different, so that will probably require a lot more research, but that's something that we've been thinking about as a way to possibly enhance the tool. And I think that's pretty much all I have to say. So it's available now, you can start using it, and that was one of the things I think we were hoping with this workshop, is that people would start to go back and use it and give us more feedback, because we can do testing, but it would be great to have testers from the collection development librarians, technical services, catalogers, and things like that. Oh, one quick thing I'll mention, and I know that Laura and Paul are going to talk about this in the afternoon, is the 583 field. And so right now, I know that CU Boulder has been putting their retention statements in the 583, and one of the things we'd like to do is build a facet around that, and also a search, so that you could actually select the 583 as a facet and look at records that way, or maybe be able to do it in a search box. So those are kind of the things that we're looking at. So are there questions right now or discussion about the tool, how you would use it? Oh, yes.
Well, since you brought it up, is it displaying the 583?
It will display it within the MARC record if you have it in one of your MARC records, but right now we don't have a facet. So what I would have to.
It actually is displaying.
And I think I know it's displaying in Prospector, but you're saying in.
I wonder if it displays how it displays
right.
in the tool.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Do you want?
Basically store the entire MARC record that you send us, and if multiple libraries, as Rose mentioned, own the same MARC record, we store everybody's version of it. Mm-hmm. So say, for example, CU Boulder might have a 583 field, TU maybe for a record doesn't. We actually store them both, and that's how we are able to be able to build facets and show yours and show the
right.
that doesn't have it.
Yeah, so it would be the records. Now, the interesting thing is I think I'm wondering, the Boulder export was we got that really, I think a while back, and I don't know if that was before the 583s. So I might have to look into that a little bit more, just actually see it. But it definitely, if it's in your MARC record, we're not changing anything, so that it should be in the tool. So, any other? Oh, great.
And this is only pulling print records. It's not pulling ebook records.
It's whatever you send us, and so we've been saying pretty much just send us everything. And so assuming that you're sending us all the ebooks, everything that you send in that MARC export is what we'd be able to show. And actually in the facet, there is a format facet, so we could technically limit by ebook. Yes?
It exclude live facet, so you can exclude all
So the question is, can we exclude by facets? Yeah, I think sometimes I'm not sure how, I want to say yes, that you can in theory, but sometimes it's not that clean, I think. But it definitely, the possibility, if there is a format facet and it has ebook, you can exclude by that. But it's not, I don't think it's ever 100% clean, is my guess. But, yes.
At Colorado College, we've done a huge reading project, and one of the things that we look in Prospector to see for the last copy,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes there'll be 3 copies, but 2 of them are local use.
Right.
So that affects our decision. Will
Right.
this tool at any point show what's local use, so that we can facet by that versus what's circulating?
That's a great enhancement and suggestion. That's the kind of thinking that we want. That if people have copies of something and making a special.
That would be good.
Maybe those not just allowed to be circulating. These are the kind of things I think we would get down to loading potential branch or circulation information. That could be a future
Right.
enhancement.
That-
It doesn't do it now though.
Right, and that's a good, yeah, so that would, I think, be in that 9XX field where the circ availability would be located. So, but that, yeah, that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. Okay. Another thing that came up at another meeting was, it would be great if we can get people to do this as a script so that we're just constantly always getting, data every month, getting your updates from your catalog. Because I think that's going to really help a lot, because if you just did a weeding project and and you don't send that updated file, then others won't know about it, so you can't really. So hopefully that's something that people will be able to do, is send us these updates like monthly or quarterly. Yes. Yeah, I can check with them. So the question was, would Marmot be willing to share that script? And I will write that down to see if I can get that from someone at Marmot. Uh-huh. Anything else? Yes.
Just to add on to it, I think it'd be really helpful to know when libraries were updating it and the last time that they updated their data.
Okay.
Because as I've been playing around with it, like the search you did, the latest results for 2012, 2015,
Uh-huh.
so you start to wonder. So I think when you do a collection analysis, you really need to know what the latest data is available, so you know that you're comparing the same thing.
Yes.
It's kind of nice to keep track of like the last updated.
Right, so if we had some kind of like a date stamp on when the last time somebody submitted their data, yes, that, a date stamp, I'm gonna put that on there. Because I think that would be really good. And a lot of this data right now is actually quite old. I think Marmot has been sending us regular updates, but I don't think we've gotten updates from other libraries. So that's probably something we need to do too. So, anything else? Okay, great. Well, if you have other questions, we have, my email, or anybody at the Alliance, really. We're small, so we'll get it to the right person. Thank you.